how do we start to deconstruct the idea of being a people pleaser using nonviolent communication? So NVC traditionally doesn't like to look at labels. We talk about making observations versus thinking about something as like a this or a that. I'm a people pleaser, you're a people pleaser. But for me, I think it's helpful sometimes to have a way of grasping patterns. And so I was just working with somebody, a client, who was noticing a persistent pattern of making decisions that she later regretted. She was clear on what her needs were and what she wanted to do around, in her case, it had to do with volunteering and how much she was or wasn't going to schedule versus time on her own for doing fun things, having her own weekend, and so on. And yet she's kind of the go-to person in a couple of organizations that she works with. And so they'll say, well, we really do need you, and it would be really helpful. And oh my gosh, is it even possible that you could do a couple of minutes or a couple of hours, just here or there? And she finds herself saying yes. And so if your needs are really solid when you're thinking about them by yourself, and then suddenly when somebody else kind of shares a different need that they have, or something that they're hoping for, if you notice that kind of your sense of things gets real fluid, more fluid than you would enjoy, then maybe this will be helpful. So first of all, I want to look at what are some of the needs at play, right? Because usually for people that run this kind of a pattern, have this experience over and over again of themselves, there's going to be both surface level needs and certain core kind of deeper needs that may not be as obvious at first. So certainly if we're talking about being a people pleaser, there's something about contribution and support and helping out and being friendly, things like that, right? A lot of people who think of themselves as people pleasers can certainly identify with all of that. And yet I tend to notice that there's other things that also really come up, like belonging, mattering, like what it is to, to be the one that's counted on, like what does, sometimes even safety, is really at play for somebody that's kind of running a people-pleasing pattern in any kind of consistent way. So if you have your feelings and needs list, and if you don't, you can go to consciouscommunication.co. That's my website, and there's /feelings or /needs. You can find lists there. There's plenty of other places too online. But take a look and see, if you can identify not only like what's happening in a given moment when you change your mind and maybe regret changing your mind and doing what somebody else wants, and like then also kind of doing this deeper work, what's at play. Maybe it's relationship dependent. In other words, maybe this comes up with a specific relationship, a particular person where the dynamic is that you have a sense of putting their needs and their requests above your own. And so there's a deeper thing around empowerment or self-expression, right? Something like that. So typically the people-pleasing pattern, when clients come to me with it, it's very, very often women who are, or women-identified folks who are struggling with it. And I think it's also really interesting to start to look at the systemic lens, to recognize that this may not be just my specific problem because of my personality and my upbringing and so forth, but like what's the wider context? If we kind of zoom out, what else do we see around people-pleasing? And gosh, there is a ton I could say about really any of this. I just want to take a very thin slice of it for right now and say that for one example, and this is what came up and was really resonant in with this client who's a leader in her organization, is women are conditioned to often really be conscientious of the needs of others in their lives, or needs of the group as a whole, in a very particular way. So that's really important to notice. And what was definitely true for many, many women on the planet, and is still true, I'd say even today for some, is that a lot of times the best way of taking care of our own needs was indirect, by taking care of somebody else's. Like that was the way to have the most sense of power or impact, right? So, for example, this is an extreme example, but just to kind of make the point, in a situation where a woman doesn't have a lot of financial resources and is relying on her parents or on a partner, for financial sustainability, sometimes there gets to be a setup where it's like, gosh, if I upset the apple cart too much, it could end up having an impact on me. I don't know that I have, other things in place to support me. And so sometimes my way of making sure that I'm taken care of is by making you happy, trying to do what I can to indirectly meet my own needs, right? So that's just one systemic pattern that can sometimes still be at play, even when the context is different, like it's like those kind of systemic patterns show up, even sometimes for those of us that, do have access to our own, we have our own income, and, so on and so forth. So the third thing I want to share is a really quick little system. Anybody that knows me knows how much I love the red, yellow, green system. This is from Mickey Cashton, and I learned it from her, and it is a way of looking at levels of willingness. Like if I'm thinking about saying yes, and no is a different thing, there might be a whole other conversation there to be had about no, but within the context of if I'm a yes about something, having some clarity about the level of willingness there. Is this an easy yes for me? Is this yes quite a stretch for me? Or is it somewhere in between? And so the green yes is the yes that's like, you want Italian food? I want Italian food. I'm a green yes. Like what me saying yes to whatever you're asking is totally connecting me to what I'd want to do anyway. So easy yes. These are lovely when they happen, right? This is like kind of an inherent win-win. And sometimes it's a yellow, which is sort of like, I could go one way or the other. I could, like do you want to leave at 6:30 or 6:45 for dinner? I might be like, I'm a yellow, it doesn't matter, like either time, whatever you prefer, right? Like it doesn't make a difference to me. So it's nice to know when somebody's a yellow, because then you can go like, well, I guess I do have a preference. I would rather get there a teeny bit earlier. Let's leave at 6:30, or what have you, right? So this is a way of giving people a little bit more feedback if you're talking interpersonally, but it is also important for checking in just within yourself. Like, well, yeah, do I care if we leave at 6:30 or 6:45? Okay. And the red yes is sometimes where people have like so much transformation when they start to employ and check in for their red yeses. So the red yeses, this is not a no, even though I know a red light on a traffic signal means stop. Here, a red yes means it's a stretch. Like there's a certain cost for me, but I'm willing. And the truth is if you give too many red yeses to any particular person, or even kind of within your own self, resentment will build up. That's one of the costs of too many red yeses, if there's not some other way in which reciprocity or mutuality is kind of tended, right? So, the example I like to use with people is the first time I learned this, and shortly after I had an opportunity to use it, it was around a request to give somebody a ride to the airport. And it's like, that's almost always a red yes, but not always for me anyway. It's like, there are times when it's like, oh, I want to, I'm either excited to see or want to be the last, like want that little bit of extra time. Sometimes now I actually commute and drive right past my local airport. And so sometimes it's a yellow, like it doesn't make much difference. I don't particularly need to or want to drive somebody, but I don't mind, you know, doesn't matter one way or the other, would be a yellow. And then red is like, it would be a stretch. Like for me, this one particular morning, it was just going to be like a timing thing with traffic. It was going to be a little bit hard for me to get the airport and back. And so letting somebody else know, or just noticing in yourself, oh my gosh, this is a bit of a stretch. Gives you an indication that there might be something else that wants to be considered, you know, something else that you can explore. And so, you know, as I talked about this with this client in terms of whether she was saying yes or no on these requests to volunteer and take on more hours and more duties with some of these volunteer options, you know, it's like, okay, like if you can let somebody know, like, you know, if I were to say yes, it would be a real stretch for me. And I'm willing to, if you have a really high need, if you'd be in a bind, perhaps, if I weren't able to do this, you know, like that information would matter to me, you know. But what's really amazing is it's not unusual to let people know, gosh, that would be a real stretch for me. I'm, you know, just kind of wanting to get some rest this weekend. I'm wanting, you know, like what are some of the other needs at play, essentially. But conversationally, you can do this in sort of your conversational NVC. And then they have an opportunity to go like, oh, well, you know, actually this weekend we kind of have certain things covered. It wouldn't be terrible if you couldn't come. I was just checking, you know. In fact, with this airport invite that I was first referring, where it was going to be a bind, sorry, a little bit tricky for me, I had the opportunity to ask the person, do you have any other options? Is it kind of like, if I don't do it, you're really scrambling? And he was like, you know, actually, there are a couple other people. Let me just ask, let me see. And texted back in a couple of minutes. He's like, yeah, it's covered, right? It's good. So, you know, in that case, I mean, the people pleaser, sure, wants to help and wants, you know, in this case, like I think of the people pleaser as wanting to know that, you know, my friend got the ride that they needed, and win-win. They got what they needed. I got what I wanted, and you know, the people pleaser is okay with that. So I hope this was helpful. Feel free to send me your questions, whether it's about anything that I shared here or something else, and I'll make sure to make a video about it for you. Thanks so much. Have a good one.